It's now time for the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, iTunes, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and the MikeWagnerShow.com. Mike brings you great guests and interesting people from all across the globe. So sit back, relax, and enjoy another great episode of the Mike Wagner Show.
Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs at below the competition way. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support at sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at Facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, Apple, and more. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. And also, you can also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with a wonderful gentleman on the border of Delaware and Maryland, living out in Ocean City. He's taking in a wonderful view. He's owner of a team building ROI group. And he's also in a group called Little King, he calls himself. And he's got some albums out. We'll be listening to his latest as well, too, and one of his singles later on the program. He's got about several of them right now. And some talk about a concept, some talk about a generation. And we just have a very, very talented dual career person. We'll get more into that. But right now, live from beautiful Ocean City, where I'm sure the ocean view is perfect. We love to be out there. Live, ladies and gentlemen, from the ocean, the Little King himself, Ryan Rosoff. Ryan, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Mike. Thanks for that lovely introduction. I feel way more important now than I actually am in real life, so really appreciate that, man.
But then a little king is more of a misnomer. You feel like a big king. That's the thing, so.
Yeah, well, I make jokes about that. Little King is actually, in theory, the translation of my first name, Ryan. So back in the late 90s when I was forming my own group and decided I was just going to kind of take reins of the project, since musicians typically can be really flaky. I figured if I was going to get anything done, I probably ought to do it myself. So came up with the name Little King. So sort of like Little Tyrant, maybe. I don't know, exactly where that came from. But anyway, that's me, my friend, Little King himself.
I was just going to ask you how you got started as well, too. But of course, you also have you're also owner of Team Building ROI as well. We can talk about that. But first, let's talk about how you got started in music and Little King.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Seattle in the 80s, and, I really was opened up to a lot of music by my brother, who's a couple of years older than me, as well as my parents. My dad's a big Stones and Beatles fan, from the 60s. And then my brother, like I said, is 3 years older than me. So we were bringing home a lot of albums and having stereo wars back in the day. He was a real big Led Zeppelin guy and kind of into Iron Maiden, some of the heavier stuff. And I was more into Rush and, Pink Floyd, things like that. So he would play a song and then I'd play a song, and we'd kind of crank it back and forth from his room to my room to his room until my mom would come up and tell us to knock it off. So I always loved music, and songs stuck in my head. I can still recite commercials from the 70s and the 80s when I was a little kid. So it's just something I've kind of always gravitated towards. And then, as I moved to El Paso in the early 90s down to Texas, I was playing guitar and started listening to some music down there that was a little different, and got involved with some musicians. One thing led to another. And so, like I said, in about 1996 or so, I formed Little King because I wanted to make some songs myself. So basically from there, I've released about 6 albums, 4 albums and a couple EPs in the last, almost 23 years now. So it's amazing. 23 years goes by in the blink of an eye, but here I am in Maryland/Delaware talking to you. And it's like I said, it's been a blur, and a lot of good times, a lot of perseverance and things like that. So at the end of the day, I'm pretty proud of the output, and certainly haven't finished. We got a lot more to do, and including this year, we got some new music hopefully coming out soon. So that's a good catch up right there, I think, Mike.
And of course, too, you've got one we're going to be playing as well, too, and it's just amazing. Going back to the Stereo Wars as well, too, and I remember being involved in Stereo Wars. Somebody has we're going by brands, Sony, Lloyd, Panasonic, and I'm trying to think of some of the other big ones. You had Pioneer,
Sanyo, they had those
Sanyo, yes. Oh my gosh, it's like
Panasonic.
What brands did you actually have when you got in these wars, and who blew out their speakers first?
I don't remember what my brother had, but I definitely had those big old Sanyos, with a fake wood and the big black, mesh on them. I mean, people don't now who buy their first stereo, they have no concept of how big those speakers used to be and how loud they used to be. So I think I played a song. I played Xanadu by Rush with a ton of bottom end, synth bottom end. I think I lost /1. I think I blew my speakers out with that song in the early 80s, right before CDs. I mean, we're talking about LPs. Of course.
I remember the LPs, before, yes.
Yeah, of course. So this is, spinning A Farewell to Kings by Rush, probably, 1980, 1981, and boom, that big bottom end hit, and that was the end of that. It was time to upgrade or change some different speakers. So I think I was the winner of that particular battle.
And of course, how loud and long you played as well, too. And I remember those days. And of course, getting back to Little King as well, too, that you had your first album, was it Trans Mountain in 97? Time Extension 98, but you also went through, and it looks like a 6-year absence as well. To you have Virus Divine in 04, then Legacy of Fools 08, and maybe just tell us about the time gap and what you did during that time.
Yeah, I'd like to, say that I'm consistently inconsistent, or vice versa. I mean, it's never intended to be that way, but I'm a father. I got a couple kids and a career, and life intrudes, and sometimes I haven't been able, necessarily financially or just, in terms of my focus, to be able to entirely dedicate myself to the release of music. In particular, I think, especially now with downloads being, the key to not making money selling music anymore, you really have to tour and continue to kind of play live in order to further one's career, unless, as I've done, you're able to release music every few years. So it does seem like I've gone every 3, 4, 5 years and then released another album. And I also don't want to put out music for the sake of putting out music, Mike. I don't want to put things out that are going to last, that leave something of a legacy, and that are well thought out and well put together and constructed. I don't anticipate ever, putting out an album a year unless I'm really inspired. I'm really in a place where I'm able to do that. I think that taking your time and being patient and working songs and reworking them. I'm my own editor for the most part. So, when I'm editing and when I'm writing a song, I want to make sure that it's finished when it's done. And that doesn't typically, the way I write music and the way I construct music and arrangements doesn't typically lend itself to writing a song or an album in a day or a week or a month. It's a much longer process for me. So in the end of the day, I'm okay with the bands that I listen to go in the studio and they come out in a week and a half and maybe write an album every year. It's just never really been my MO, so to speak. So at this point, I think it's a little bit accelerated. I feel motivated. I really like the band and the core that I've got, and I feel like we've really hit our stride in terms of this lineup that I'm playing with now, and certainly Occam Spoiled, the new EP, I feel is the best work that I've ever done. So maybe into my 40s I've figured something out, but as I said before, I don't really like to rush these things out. So whether it's 2 years or a year and a half or 3 or 4 years, I want to make sure that when I release something and I look back in 20 years as I do now, to Time Extension and 17 years back to Virus Divine, that I have output that I'm proud of, and it's something that I can listen to and not completely cringe, all the way through listening to my catalog.
Like how 80s, how 90s, some people would say, you'll look back on it, so you want a timeless thing, you're right.
Yeah, that's right. And I was raised on that music, and I try to stay as current as I can. I think a lot of us, most of us relate to the music that we grew up with. I think that's the stuff that we internalize. And so my playlist is certainly, rooted a lot in the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, and into the 2000s. But, I do try and stay current. I do listen to, what's going on the radio now. Sometimes it's hard for me to get my head around. I'm not a huge fan of auto-tune. I'm not a huge fan of computer-produced music. I like to think that, we do things in 1 or 2 takes. We do them live. We don't use a lot of auto-tune in the studio. But, yeah, I certainly harken back to the day, my friend, when it comes to music that still moves me the most.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you talked about the one. Do you play it on albums as well, too, right? Rush and Led Zeppelin. Who are some of your favorite artists and singers and musicians growing up, and the ones that influence you guys as Little Kings today?
Yeah, well, those two guys in particular, I think Zeppelin and Rush were big, so I don't need to get into a great detail about them. And Pink Floyd, I mentioned them before. I was sort of late to the Steely Dan party. I love them. They're one of my favorite bands, but I didn't really understand that, I think, until I got a little older, just because their lyrics, I think, are for adults. They're hard to relate to when you're a kid growing up. Most of Donald Fagen's lyrics are about, sex and drugs and rock and roll. So, but he's pretty, he's pretty articulate, and he uses a lot of sort of, inferences and references that I didn't maybe necessarily grasp. So Steely Dan, certainly a huge Talking Heads fan, and David Byrne's solo career as well has been very influential to me. I think he's an absolute genius. I grew up on in the 80s, but late 80s and on into the 90s, I became a huge hip hop fan. So I still listen to a lot of Tupac and Biggie and all of the Aftermath stuff, Dr. Dre and Death Row, and those artists really maybe don't necessarily influence my music, but they certainly influence my work ethic, and they certainly influence the hustle ethic. I was actually a hip hop promoter for about 6 years in the early 2000s, and most of my clients were up and coming, underground rappers, and to see how much they hustle and grind, and see how much, they spend crafting their lyrics and trying to get the word out, really did inspire me as an artist. So I've got an interesting background. I grew up in rock and roll, but I certainly have listened to a lot of hip hop, and of course, jazz and reggae. I'm a big Peter Tosh fan, and I enjoy a lot of the Jamaican music too. So I think all of those styles somehow, some way work their way into being Little King. I'm not exactly sure how. If you ask me, I don't know that I'd be able to tell you, but I'm pretty boring when it comes to classic rock stuff, but I think I've got a lot of the other things that worm their way into my music as well.
You mentioned jazz as well too. Who are some of your favorite musicians when it comes to jazz?
Yeah, I'm pretty generic. I mean, I love Coltrane, and when I'm writing or when I'm walking, I definitely listen to a lot of Coltrane, and certainly some Miles Davis. I was listening to Take 5 this morning, actually, because I'm constructing a song that has a couple passages in 5, and so in Take 5, it really made that that measure in 5/4 flow pretty seamlessly. So definitely listen to a lot of the classics. I don't know that I can listen to a ton of jazz. Recorded jazz. I certainly appreciate live jazz, especially when individual soloists take their cues and do their thing. I really appreciate solo art like that. So I do enjoy jazz, but it certainly isn't, the primary focus of what I listen to, but certainly Coltrane and Miles for sure. And even the older stuff too, even going back to Glenn Miller Orchestra.
Yes.
Just arrangements and things like that. I love it all, man. My playlist drives everybody nuts because it's like, good God, will you just pick something? when I hit shuffle on my playlist, I've lost a girlfriend or two like that, my friend.
Oh, no.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And of course, you talked about Miles Davis as well, too. What are your thoughts on his classic Bitches Brew?
Yeah, that's the one. So that's the one my brother turned me on to back in the day, and I think is it a 4-disc CD? I can't remember. I don't have the disc anymore, but it opened my mind up. And of course, I was coming at it as a kid from a rock and roll standpoint. That was rock was the stuff that I grew up on. So to hear somebody be able to incorporate all those movements and sort of, it's almost to me a blend of classical and rock and roll and blues and R&B, to be able to put all that stuff and to create all those moods and all those different distinct tones. It was really something that opened my eyes to what could be done, even just in the context of, in my case, in a 3-piece band. What can you do? And I was listening to Vivaldi the other day, and I listened to all the 4 Seasons, because that's another thing that inspires me. And just, again, all those different movements and how many moods you can create, and yet still have a through line and have something that connects each of those pieces. And I think, Miles, especially in Bitches Brew, I think was able to achieve that for sure.
That is fantastic. We'll take 5 and talk about your 5 releases before your latest. But first, listen to The Mike Wagner Show at themikewagnershow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. 888-973-3960 or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at Facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, Apple, and more. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with the dual career Little King, the Big King from Ocean City, Maryland, along the border of Delaware. Ryan Rosoff here on the Mike Wagner Show. We talked about how he got started and how he became Little King, and of course, talking about how he got the name, his upbringing when it comes to music, and we're going to talk about his the 5 releases that they put out. We'll start off with Trans Mountain in '97, and tell us how he got started, and we can get the ball rolling.
Yeah, it was a brutal process. I had no clue what I was doing, my friend. It was one of those things where I'd written some songs. I think I was 23 or 24 years old as I was writing those songs, and was trying to describe the arc of a relationship. Even though I got married at a young age. I was 20 when I married my first wife, and I was trying to express what it was like to fall in love and also be able to kind of see the writing on the wall that maybe things weren't going to work out. And so Trans Mountain is a place in El Paso, Texas. It's actually the highest point in the city. It's about a mile high, and it's a pass that goes from northeast El Paso to the west side. And so Trans Mountain was a metaphor, but I just, as decent as the songs were and as decent of a guitar player as I was at that point, I wasn't a producer. I wasn't a great arranger, and I certainly wasn't a great singer. And so I like to joke with people, you've got to be really close to me to be able to hear that album. It's not available anywhere online. I think my family and about 700 unlucky people from Texas, we used to tour all over Texas back in the day, have that album. So I'm sure at some point and sometimes someone will post it online, and I'll roll my eyes and take it like a man. But it was a good introduction to me. I almost consider it to be a demo, but it certainly was nothing other than just sort of a learning process for me.
Mm-hmm. And he also went a year later to Time Extension, which came out in '98. It's a concept album about a fictional man's life. And tell us about that second album.
Yeah, so I've always had sort of a concept of time and how precious it is, and the passage of time. And so that was a pretty big leap from '97 to '98. I think, I took a lot of singing lessons, and I was playing a lot more, and I really had this high-minded concept of a man on his deathbed and sort of being revived. And actually the album opens in the emergency room, and he's looking back at all the places in his life where he might want to go back and do something differently than he had done. So each song, on Time Extension is sort of one of those points where he might go back and change things. So it talks about spending a little more time with his family, perhaps not selling out. There's a song dedicated to my daughter called Madeline, which is basically is an instrumental I used to put her to sleep with. And we had a record deal, so we actually had some money behind us. There's a company called Shade Records down in Texas that we recorded a place called Village Studios, which has done, everybody from Juan Gabriel to ZZ Top to a bunch of famous bands. And so we had the great studio experience. We had some very experienced people who would put their hands on my music, and that took us from Trans Mountain, which was a demo, to an album that was actually a real album. We're actually incorporating a couple songs, Bloodline and I Didn't Ask, into our live set this year. So it's really cool to go back and revisit some of those songs and say, gosh, maybe I wasn't totally inept in 1998. There might have actually been some merit to what I was doing. I still hadn't quite developed, I don't think, as a singer. I don't think I'd quite developed as an arranger. There's some passages that I've revamped, when we play them live, but it certainly is something that I don't totally cringe when I listen to now. And I'm pretty proud of, being 25 or 26 years old and recording that and putting it out. And I think people who listen to that are like, okay, I can see where this guy was going. There's some redeemable qualities on that one. But again, I don't think we really arrived, and I really arrived as an artist until Virus to Mine came out in 2003. And I think that's the one where it's sort of the beginnings of me really knowing what I was doing from start to finish.
And of course, we were going to talk about that Virus Divine. And of course, you had All I Need, Narcissus, and Echo, Peacemaker, Second Wind in the Morning. And just tell us a little more about that album. Especially, it took like a 6-year time off as well, too, and quite well worth it.
Yeah, married and working and trying to make things work, and moved to Seattle for a while, which is my hometown, then back down to Texas, and had toured a lot in between, and just wasn't working for me in terms of my marital, my marriage and being a young father and trying to take care of business. So did take a little time off, and as I had said before, started a production company where I was doing a lot of promotion and particularly a lot of hip hop. But I had the opportunity in 2003 to travel to Toronto, which is where of course Rush is from, and had the opportunity to meet their old producer Terry Brown, who did their first 10 albums I would consider to be their classic albums. And Terry and I became friends, and I had a bunch of songs that were sort of inspired as I was going through a divorce. And so when I contacted Terry and said, hey, I've got these songs and they're half recorded, would you like to work on them? And one thing led to another, and we finished engineering and tracking those down in Texas. And I took the tracks up to Terry up in Toronto and spent a couple weeks with him and mixed them and mastered them up there. And he's a legend. I mean, the guy is, first of all, one of the nicest, smartest, most humble men I've ever met. It's amazing, you meet your heroes, and a lot of times I think you're disappointed, but he was not disappointing, and he and I still remain friends to this day. He's in the 70s now, but boy, he was full of energy and just a great guy to work with, and I learned so much working with him. So Virus is cool. He put his touch on that, and what they call the Brown sound, Terry Brown's famous Brown sound. He mixed an album that I think is close to perfect as it could have been, and so I'm pretty proud of that one. And we again incorporate couple of the songs from that album, Virus Divines, in the new set list, as well as Narcissus and Echo. And I listened back to that one, and it moves me. I was going through a tough time for a lot of that when I recorded it, and it harkens back. All the songs are like little satellite dishes, and they sort of soak up the essence of what was going through at that time. And so when I go back and I listen to Virus, I feel like, gosh, I remember the ethos of what I was going through at that time. I remember what inspired me, and a lot of it I can even remember when I wrote, the guitar riff, where I was and what I was doing and what I was wearing that day in the studio. It really had a pretty profound impact, not only as a musician, but also personally. I have fond memories of that one, but they're also a little bit painful as well, for sure.
I was going to say, if it's okay, if it's okay, I'd like to play a title track and hear the Terry Brown sound. So Virus Divine here on the Mike Wagner Show. Here's the title track with the Terry Brown Rush sound here on the Mike Wagner Show for just a little bit. That song kind of reminds me in a way, in like Rush as well, too. A little bit of Alex Lifeson, a little bit of Neil Peart, maybe a little bit of Geddy Lee. That's what kind of makes me think of. You talk about Terry Brown as well, too.
Yeah, I mean, he put his hands all over that, and he made those 10 Rush albums sing. So I knew that. I've always been influenced by Rush, and again, to work with my hero and to be able to get him to kind of direct me as the songs had already been completed in terms of being recorded but not mixed, he had a profound effect on me and effect on those songs as well.
And he also did a follow-up, too, called Legacy of Fools, which came on 2008, and tell us about that one. Now, did Terry Brown produce that one, or was it done by somebody else in this one here?
No, I'm actually the producer on all the Little King records.
Okay.
Terry engineered, or Terry mixed Virus, but no, I've produced all 6 Little King records, and Eddie Garcia, who is the drummer and my good friend, is also the engineer. He owns a studio down in Texas, so we do a lot of the tracking, most of the tracking at his house, his home studio. So we had taken 3 or 4 years off. Again, I actually became a high school English teacher for a couple of years
very nice.
Down in El Paso, yeah. So I have a degree in creative writing and English from University of Texas, El Paso. So I actually decided to put that to use. I was tired of promoting hip-hop records and being on the road all the time. And I had just gotten married again to my second wife and had another kid. So
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Legacy was the second year that I had taught, and I was really impacted by teaching and seeing the state of the education system in the United States. And it was also sort of the tail end of the Iraq War, which I was pretty outspoken against, even at the outset of it, and wasn't a big fan of what we were doing in terms of our sort of imperialistic tendencies, as we tend to have sometimes in this country. So I was sort of protesting that and really talking about, my relationships, the things that I had done, right and wrong in the previous relationships, as well as 202, which is the last song, and 202 was the name of my classroom, and really is sort of my statement, from the inside out of looking at the state of education in the United States and public education in particular. And so I was really writing a message to my students, many of which still 12, 13, 14 years later still contact me and I'm still in touch with. And that's very gratifying. But I remember one time playing some of my songs from that album as, all of a sudden their English teachers got an album coming out, and I tried to keep that stuff pretty hidden. But, kids are pretty industrious, and they certainly know how to use the internet back then better than I did. So they were able to find out kind of what was going on, and actually finally had one class period where I spent 60 minutes just going through some of the lyrics, and that one was again a message to my students, and 202 something that I'm pretty proud of too. We don't play that one live, it's a little difficult to pull off, but as I listen back to that one, it's particularly satisfying, as is Collateral Damage, and a couple others on there. Mea Culpa is a song about apologies. Mea culpa means my bad, so to speak. So those still make their way into the set. And yeah, Legacy of Fools is my legacy. What are we leaving behind? I always like to poke a little fun at myself. So if it's a legacy of fools, I guess I'm the fool that's leaving it behind. But I make music because I want to leave something for my kids and my great grandkids who'll never know me. They'll never get to meet me. But perhaps if they have my music and they have my words and they're able to listen back, in 100 years or whatever, they'll have a good sense of who their great grandfather was, and that's pretty cool to me. So it's a big part of what I do and why I do what I do.
That sounds amazing too. We'll get into your second latest release, OD1, which came out in 2014, and your new one as well too. But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at SonicWebStudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking our budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today at 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960, or email to support at sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 10% off your first order. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on the MikeWagnerShow.com. You can check our Facebook page at Facebook.com/The Mike Wagner Show. You can download and listen on Facebook, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Also on Anchor FM, Radio Public, iTunes, Google Play, Apple, and more. Take the Mike Wagner Show with you on any mobile device. Subscribe to the Mike Wagner Show on the YouTube channel. Also follow the Mike Wagner Show on Instagram and Twitter today. We're here with Ryan Rosoff of Little Kings here on the Mike Wagner Show. We talked about his first 4 albums, especially the first 2 starting in the late 90s, going into Virus Divine and Legacy of Fools for the 2000 campaign, and jump ahead to 2014 OD1, which is leading up to the brand new, soon-to-be epic Oakland's Foil. And let's talk about OD1 and tell us more about it and why the name OD1.
So I was moving back from California, where I had been living for about 6 years. I was moving back from California to the eastern shore of Maryland and Delaware, where I am now. And I traveled through Texas as I was driving back. My wife at the time and my son were already here, so I spent some time kind of commuting between the West Coast to the East Coast. And as I stopped in Texas, I had some songs written. I kind of wanted to stay in the game. It had been, since 2008 since I'd put anything out. And I had a song called Happy Home, which was really, again, a reflection of some tough times, not only in my marriage, but also in work and things that I was going through. So really felt like I needed to record that one. And that today probably still, remains my favorite song that I've ever written. And I think, it's something that I'm super proud of, but it was tough. It was a difficult time. And, I had an instrumental that I'd had in the bag for a long time with a Let It Beat Down and enjoyed playing that one. And I'm a huge Oakland Raiders fan too. So the Black Hole is homage to going to Raiders games and partying in the parking lot, which I've done more than my share of, RIP Oakland Raiders, now the Vegas Raiders. But I was back with Eddie in Texas and I wanted to make some songs. And so I did it. And as I said, Happy Home in particular. And OD1 is also homage to organizational development, which is, as you've mentioned a little bit, I own a team building company, and team building is sort of under the umbrella of organizational development. That's what we do, to help teams, corporate teams function together outside of their work environment and help them learn a little bit about communication and leadership styles. And so OD is the terminology we use for organizational development. So it was a play on that, as well as overdose and whatever other OD acronym you could come up with. But,
wow.
But that's what was going on with OD1.
Wow, that is something. I was going to ask you what OD1. I was going to ask you about team building ROI. Now I got myself a pretty good idea. So it's basically like in between your singing, songwriting, and albums as well, too. Team building ROI. And what are some of the current projects you're doing with OD1 as well, too, as part of team building ROI?
Well, Team Building ROI, OD1 was just the name of the album, but Team Building ROI is the name of the company. And so I've owned and operated that since 2011. So we're into our almost at 9 years. And we actually facilitated over 200 events a year for the last couple of years. So we were very busy out in Silicon Valley. It's a little bit of a weird time now with the coronavirus. One thing people don't want to be doing necessarily is getting together in a small space with large groups of people. So we've had 5 or 6 events just in the last week postponed, which we sort of anticipated. But our clients are Google and Apple and Facebook and Yahoo and Intel and Cisco and Adobe and all of those companies that are sort of up and down that peninsula from basically from South San Francisco and Palo Alto all the way into San Jose. That's what what's considered Silicon Valley. So our headquarters are there, my office is there, and all of my staff. Even though I live on the East Coast, my business partner Jay, as well as his, our staff is back there. So we facilitate team building events, everything from zombie scavenger hunts to food truck team building to, we build bicycles. We have all sorts of different, food-based challenges and try and get people away from technology. So we do murder mysteries and we do mobile team escapes, which are escape rooms. So lots of different fun stuff for teams to step outside of their work environment, whether it's a group of 10 or 15 or a group of 800, which we've done on a battleship somewhere near San Francisco. We do
battleship. I love it.
Yeah, we do. So we do a lot of really fun stuff. And again, I think, at this point, we're fairly well established after 9 years almost in Silicon Valley. So things are good. Although right now, as I said, just with the scare of the coronavirus, people, not the virus divine. It is not a divine virus by any means.
Right, yeah.
Coronavirus is quite the opposite. So people are a little sketchy right now in terms of booking team building events, but we shall weather this storm, and we're coming up with some alternate solutions in terms of people working from home, how they might be able to team build remotely, working from their workstation at home rather than being in the office. So that is my life. That's my paycheck. That is, outside of the music, that's where my passion lies. So the combination of team building and running a band and being in the music business and, having kids and, being a, Mr. Mom, because I'm a single dad again. And so laundry and grocery shopping and breakfast, lunch, and dinner is my job for the most part too. So, I'm a busy guy, but at the end of the day, if I wasn't busy, when left to my own devices, I tend to get in trouble. So it's probably good that, that I stay busy.
Wow. You are the ultimate dual career person, and I'm ready to jump in and play one of those games as well too. You've got some great ideas. I have to say that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So when Occam's Foil was released, and Occam's Foil came out late at the end of the year, my business partner and I don't even talk about music, and it's funny because he is a bass player and knows a lot of my songs from back in the day, and actually went to Berklee School of Music for a while, so he's very good. But we're so busy with work that we never even discussed the fact that that I had an album coming out. So I think he was pretty surprised, like, oh yeah, by the way, here's my EP. So Jay has not even, I don't know if he's even heard the entire album yet, but yeah, Occam's Foil came out at the end of last year, and we really got started with a promotion at the beginning of this year. And I'm pretty excited because things seem to be going really well. People seem to be taking to it, and in the 6th album, boy, if I don't know what I'm doing, by this time I probably should quit. So I'm pretty excited with Occam's Foil so far.
It sounds great too. We're going to play a track off of that. We're going to play a Forgotten Mile from Little King right here on the Mike Wagner Show. If
I was a lost guy, lonely crossing on a crazy coastal road. Set me in pain. This highway is a motorcycle to me. A creature who wants some. I'd better
is Forgotten by Little King here on the Mike Wagner Show. And tell us more about that album and that song in particular, and what inspired you to write it.
Yeah, so Forgotten Mile actually is an area of Delaware that I lived for about 3 years. It's about a mile from the ocean, and it's unincorporated, so it's between a couple cities. But it's just the name of the area. And I'm an English teacher, right, or reformed English teacher, so I like metaphors. And it's an area where tortoises cross from the ocean to a bay, and then they lay their eggs, and then they go back to the sea. And so it's a process that happens all over all over the world. But we see the tortoises crossing the highway right where I lived, and most of them don't make it. To be honest with you, they get smashed. And so I saw it sort of as a metaphor, for living in a place that I wasn't necessarily anticipating living, and maybe it wasn't my favorite place in the world to live, but trying to make the best of it and sort of feeling like one of those tortoises trying to dodge traffic, as I'm crossing back and forth across the river or across the road. So that's Forgotten Mile. And Occam's foil is sort of based on the theory of Occam's razor, which Father William of Occam was a friar from 1300s in England, and his basic theory, which came to be known as Occam's razor, was the simplest answer is usually the correct one. And the theory is a little more complex than that, but in essence, that's what it's been distilled to in modern day. Is whatever the simplest answer is probably the correct one. And I don't necessarily believe in that. I think it, in his time, it discouraged people from questioning the church because, again, he was a religious man. And I think now, it's more used to let people be a little lazy and a little ambivalent. And I think that the simplest answer might on the surface seem to be the correct one, but I think it discourages, deeper thought and introspection and discussion with people who maybe don't necessarily agree with you, which to me is one of the greatest downfalls in our country and around the world, really. But entertaining someone else's idea, maybe they've got an idea or maybe they've got a philosophy that you haven't necessarily considered or appreciated for what it is. And so, being a good listener and understanding things and digging a little deeper and doing a little more research. So the foil to anything in literature is the counter argument, or is what the antagonist has the foil. It's usually, or the protagonist has the foil. It's usually the antagonist. So this album is the foil to the argument or the philosophy of Occam's razor. And again, each song on there in some way, shape, or form is thinking a little bit more deeply and challenging the audience and challenging our listeners to think a little bit more deeply. Go back and listen to the song again, listen to the words, see how they're married to the music, see what they can do to open your mind up a little bit and bring that philosophy back to your own life and to your own work and to your own, impetus to go out and do better and do more and talk to somebody who you maybe necessarily doesn't agree with you. And so it may be a high-minded concept that's a little hard and difficult to get across in an interview or in 5 songs on a record, but that was certainly the motivation for calling it Occam's foil, and I think it works.
It sounds like it really works, and it's getting my mind gear on this whole thing too. And of course, you have a couple ones, Hate Counter and The Skin I'm In. You can just tell us about those very briefly.
Yeah, the Hate Counter was written down in El Paso, where we recorded, as always, and it was written before and after that horrific tragedy at Walmart where 20-some-odd people lost their lives from a shooter who had come in from Dallas and was inspired by hate. He was very much subscribed to a white supremacist attitude, and it was, in El Paso, in between times that we had recorded the instruments, gone home, and then come back and recorded the vocals. So inspired by that, as well as El Paso being right on the border, we were in very close proximity to the places where kids were separated from their parents in migrant camps along the border. And we saw many of those places as we were driving up and down, because in El Paso, again, you're literally right on the Mexican border, and you can look across from most of the city into most of Ciudad Juarez, which is a city in Mexico. So seeing that, understanding that was what America stood for at that point in time and was not what I wanted America to stand for, I was pretty angry and pretty pissed by those two particular events. And so it inspired me to write an angry song, and the music had already been written. So I went back, and Hate Counter was my response, throwing kids in a cell and building big, beautiful walls. It's not where I come from. And so El Paso is a really strange city, but it's a beautiful city, and the people are great. And seeing those tragedies and the things happening there was inspiration. And The Skin That I'm In was sort of the answer to Happy Home, which, as I said, was from OD1. Is probably one of my favorite songs that I've ever written. And it was sort of a sad and plaintive song. Well, The Skin That I'm In is describing the circumstances that were going on in Happy Home, and then ultimately sort of ends on a note of triumph, which is how I feel in my life 5 years after writing OD1. I feel very much liberated from the things that were constraining me and the angst and the sadness and the sorrow that I was going through back in 2014. I feel like I am finally at one with the skin that I'm in, which is the final line in that song. And it deals with marital infidelity, and it deals with a little bit of the paranoia that goes with it and some of the things that I was encountering as I was writing that song. But again, ultimately ends on a note of triumph and segues into what I consider to be my greatest guitar solo on that song. Probably the greatest guitar solo I've ever played, and sat down, did it in one take, put the guitar down, turned to Eddie and said, "We're done, buddy." And I listened back to that, and I'm super proud of what we achieved with that song. I think it's, if Happy Home isn't my favorite song I've ever written, The Skin That I'm In is probably my favorite.
It sounds like your best work as well, too. And do you have any upcoming plans for later on in 2020 or maybe in 2021?
Well, we're going to definitely play as many shows as we can. We've got some drummer issues because both the guys that I play with are in other bands and have other projects going on. So I think by May we'll be on the road. Certainly no later than June we'll be on the road. And plan to do at least 30 to 40 shows this year. Like to go and play in Europe if we can, although that's a whole other that's a whole other can of worms to open up, and I'm excited to do that. But more than anything, I've really been writing, Mike. I've got a couple songs that I've been working on the last couple of days that I'm very, very excited to record. And we've got a producer who I can't really talk about now, but he's done a ton of great stuff. He produced all of 311's work and Bad Brains, and done work with Soundgarden, and has done work even with Aretha Franklin and Whitney Houston. And
wow.
The guy's a legend. He lives in Jersey. So went to his house a few weeks back and spent some time with him, and we vibed and got along well. And so I'm anticipating, hoping to work with him this year and create another Little King album. And what I'm writing now is exciting. It's a little bit more intricate and a little more complex and a little bit more epic and maybe longer songs, but I'm not interested in the conventions of writing 4 to 5 minute songs anymore. I'm interested in stretching out and putting together an entire concept piece that may segue from one part into the next and the next, sort of like Dark Side of the Moon or maybe, Rush's 2112. I think those are good examples, and that's what I'm working on now. So exciting. Touring and more music and recording and getting the word out and talking to people like you. All of these things are what I love to do, and they keep me going from one moment to the next. So Little King will never stop. As long as I'm breathing, there's going to be Little King moving forward, and that's who I am, and that's my philosophy, and I don't anticipate that stopping anytime soon.
That's fantastic. I was going to ask you about any plans for an upcoming tour in 2020. You're talking about 30, 40 dates. Where are some of the cities that you're looking to play in those 30, 40 dates?
Well, we have a really good base of fans on the West Coast and into the Southwest. So if you were to start in El Paso, you work your way through Arizona, New Mexico, and up into California and Washington and Oregon. And we've got a lot of fans and friends up there. And then, I live on the East Coast now. So nice thing about living on the East Coast and playing in a band is that cities here are so close together. When you live in El Paso, the closest major city is Tucson, which is 320 miles away, and Phoenix, which is 400 miles away, and Albuquerque, which is another 300 miles away. Whereas when you're living in Ocean City, Maryland, you've got Baltimore and D.C. and New York 3.5 hours away, and Philly. And if you go south, you've got Virginia Beach, and down into Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. Cities are much closer together, so you can really tour in Jersey and New York and Pennsylvania and Maryland. You can play a different city every night for 2 weeks, and you're still playing a different place with a nice population base. So I anticipate doing the Eastern Seaboard, basically from Florida probably all the way up through to Boston. Just so many different places to play that I haven't yet played with Little King. So that's what we anticipate, is a lot of East Coast, a lot of West Coast, and you never know, I may get to Fargo, my friend. We'll
there you go. There you go.
Go visit my roots. You and I were joking offline about that when we met. My uncle still lives in Fargo, and my mom grew up in Devil's Lake, and my grandfather on the other side is from Grand Forks. So I'm North Dakota deep.
Wow, I was going to say along the east side, and maybe you can call them up afterwards and see maybe how much snow they've gotten lately, or if they've maybe it has warmed up a little bit, or have them come to the west side of the state, maybe get some heat or anything like that. Just head out to Dickinson, Williston, or maybe even Bismarck, or maybe up to Minot for a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely. Or Wapaton or Wapato or where, I guess that's the east side. But I met a guy the other day from there, and it blew my mind because in the middle of Maryland, you don't expect to meet a lot of North Dakotans, but he's actually a doctor here, and he's Persian, and he grew up in North Dakota. And I said, "You get out of here!" And he happens to be just about the same age as my mom too. So we had a pretty good conversation. It's a small world, man. And, you actually take the time to sit down and talk to people rather than get off your phone a little bit and actually look someone in the eye and have a conversation. It's amazing how interconnected we are and how many strange, funny, happy little coincidences there are if you just spend the time talking to people you might not otherwise talk to.
Mm-hmm. And here's a really funny story, too, since we're on the subject of North Dakota. We first came to North Dakota in 2007 from Chicago. I actually got recruited by an Arizona consulting firm to work some media outlets, including one of the radio stations in western North Dakota. When I resumed my radio career, I had a number of people come up to me, as the name Mike Wagner. I relate to this Wagner, that Wagner. I look at them and says, no, they're back in Illinois and Wisconsin. So it looked at me as like, I'm the only Wagner that's not connected in North Dakota. But yeah, you do. You're right. You sit down and talk to people, and it's amazing how you get all these backgrounds, what you learn from people, too. It's just amazing.
My grandparents, so they came from, or great-grandparents, I should say, came from Germany and from Russia. And they came, and they were Jewish. That side of the family is Jewish. And they came to Grand Forks, I think, in 1906. And then on the other side, I had family come to North Dakota in the late 1800s to Devil's Lake. So I've had family from North Dakota, in North Dakota probably for over 130 years, I would say, at this point.
That is amazing. Devil's Lake is great for fishing. Grand Forks is great for hockey. I have to say that.
There you go.
Yeah.
I need to get back up there. I need to go visit my uncle. He's getting older, and I need to go up and go get back to Fargo. I haven't been up there in 15 years, but one of these days, for sure, soon, I will. I'll come knock on your door, my friend, and we can hang out a little bit.
Sounds great. You're welcome anytime. And of course, we're here with once again Ryan Rosoff of Little King here on the Mike Wagner Show. And just a couple of things, we'd love to have you back on. Definitely sometime in 2020. Who do you consider biggest influence in your career, Ryan?
In my career, all those bands that we've discussed, I think those were big influences. I had a mentor, a gentleman by the name of Paul Holbrook, who I worked with in the mid to late 90s up in Seattle. And he was an entertainment, I wouldn't say he was an attorney, he was more of a consigliere, right? But he taught me the music business, and he taught me a lot about not only performance and branding and marketing, but also just how contracts work and how the business in general worked. And he really had the strongest work ethic of anybody. So he and I were in business together in the music, in the music industry for a while. And Paul was a great mentor, and he's gone on to bigger and better things. And he's got an interesting business, which is actually based in China now. It's a whole other conversation. But I would say Paul was a big influence. My father is a great man, and is fortunately still healthy and happy at age 77 and lives in Seattle. And he was a doctor. He's retired now, but again, just a kind human being, and really taught me the value of hard work and staying persistent and being kind to people and making the correct decisions, and the value of karma too, that it pays itself forward when you do something the right way rather than taking a shortcut or trying to get over on somebody. It will always come back to you in some way, shape, or form. So those two guys outside of the music, just in terms of musical influence, I think Paul and my dad are huge influences for me for sure.
That is fantastic. And what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
I think it depends on what where you're going in your life and what station you're at. I would say the thing that I've learned probably over almost 48 years, Mike, is that don't settle. Don't settle for just okay. You get one go round here, and we don't know what comes before, and we don't know what comes after. Whatever you believe in, there's no certainty. The only certainty is that you put one foot in front of the other. And I know so many people have settled for a career that may have made them a little bit more money, or maybe had a little bit more prestige, but they weren't particularly happy in it. Particularly in the in the team building business that I'm in now, I see a lot of that. I want to encourage people to follow their dreams and follow their passion, and the money will follow. And something that I preach to my children all the time: find something that lights you up every day. When you wake up, you're stoked to do it, and when you go to bed, you can't wait to get up again the next day and do it. That's a win for me. And if I could give that motivation to my children and infuse that to people surrounding me and get that message across in my music and in my everyday life, I think that's the most important thing is find your passion, go for it. Don't settle for something that's just okay. Let somebody else do that. You go get what's yours, and it'll always work itself out in the end if you believe in what you're doing.
That is fantastic advice. The heck with the coffee and the energy drinks, especially Monster, and let's pursue the dream. That's fantastic. Ryan, just want to say a big thank you for your time. You've been fantastic. Look forward to having you again soon. Once again, Ryan Rosoff of Little Kings here on the Mike Wagner Show. Once again, before we go, Ryan, we'd love to have you back on again in 2020. What are your upcoming projects? What's your website? How do people contact you? And where can people purchase and listen to your music?
Everything is on our website to start with. So www.littlekingtunes, Tunes, littlekingtunes.com is the hub. So all of the streaming services, Spotify and Apple Music and all of those good things, as well as our links to our Facebook and our Instagram and YouTube and Twitter, all at Little King Tunes. They're all on there. But littlekingtunes.com is really the hub. And I think you'll be surprised how much stuff is on there, long biography, and all of our songs from the last 5 albums are able to be streamed from YouTube on there, as well as tons of articles and images, and it's updated pretty frequently, as is our Facebook page. We have a lot of updates on there. So please, go visit, and you can certainly find a way to buy our music. God forbid somebody should actually pay for a download in 2020. If you get a crazy notion that you may want to support an artist, certainly you can go to our CD Baby page for Little King and Little King as an artist and go buy it there too. But projects yet to be announced, but certainly our touring plans are coming up. We're going to be announcing very soon our plans for the road, and when we get ready to record, that'll be on there as well. So do visit littlekingtunes.com, and we appreciate you having me on. Appreciate everybody's interest, and I can't wait to see people on the road. Come up and talk to me when you see me. I'm a pretty approachable guy. So there's no rock star ego here, my brother.
Sounds good. We'll head out to Ocean City and do that too. Ryan, just want to say a big thank you for your time. You've been fantastic. Looking forward to having you again soon. Do us a favor, keep this up to date in 2020, and love to have you back on again and come back up to North Dakota and visit us.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me. Appreciate everything.
Thanks for listening to The Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios. Visit online at sonicwebstudios.com for all your needs. The Mike Wagner Show can be heard on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Anchor FM, Radio Public, and themikewagnershow.com. Please support our program with your donations at themikewagnershow.com. Join us again next time for another great episode of The Mike Wagner Show.